Welcome to the Health Coach Nation podcast. My name is Hailey Rowe, and I'm a sales and marketing coach and LinkedIn lead generation service provider. I work with health, life, and mindset coaches and online service-based business owners to help them get more sales, shift their time to the client-generating activities instead of just the busy work, and overcome that social media overwhelm. Let's get into the show. If you're ready to take on your next paying clients, I have good news. My free 4 Basics of Client Attraction and How to Stand Out class is live at haileyrowe.com/client-attraction. In the class, you're going to learn the top 2 traits I recommend for most coaches and entrepreneurs if they really want to turn this into a career. You're going to learn how you can build demand for your services and stop getting crickets on your posts. You're going to learn the sales roadmap I used to improve my sales conversion rate and help my clients do the same. And you're going to learn so much more. So go to haileyrowe.com/client-attraction and get your copy of the class today. I am live today with Kelle Sparta, and she is an expert on energetics and how you bring that to your coaching to better help your clients, better help your own transformation. So I'm going to start, Kelle, by asking you a little bit about what does that even mean? How did you get into that? And we'll go from there.
Yeah. So I have been in the spiritual personal growth community since I was a very small child. And so I have been studying things. I mean, most coaches have heard of things like law of attraction, right? And, you know, the law of all the different universal laws, right? I was going to go in and list them all, and you don't need to hear that, but all the universal laws and those all operate on an energetic, right? And the vast majority of coaches out there are also empaths, and being an empath, the feeling what other people feel, picking up on other people's emotions, the things that make us great coaches is also an energetic. It is how we hold our energy field. And it's also, you know, for empaths, there's a lot of downsides to that, right? Because, you know, you feel what other people feel, you get run over by other people's strong emotions. It's very hard for you to break up with people if you've been in a relationship with them. There's a lot of things that go into that. And, you know, feeling stressed in large crowds and, you know, all sorts of stuff, right? That's about how you hold your energy. As a coach, we also have to think about how we hold our energy in a group, right? So if you're holding a group container, right? How does that work? How do you hold that energy? How do you set an intention for that energy that allows the people within that group to be impacted by that? How do you set up a gestalt, which is an energetic movement through space, through time, for your program, so that people who come in a year or two after the people in the beginning get all the benefits of all the movement that happened in that first 2 years or 3 years of the program that you've been running, right? There's a lot of different elements. If you get up on stage and you sell from the stage, how do you hold the container of that stage? So lots of different pieces and parts involved in this whole process.
Yeah,
I hope that answered your question.
Well, I think that you make a good point that a lot of coaches are empaths, and it's our job as coaches to make sure that we're showing up for our clients from an open space and not in our own heads, or not, as some coaching programs call it, like jumping in the pool with them, meaning like we just commiserate together. We have to hold the space for the client and focus on them. So how would we use energetics to do that and to not, you know, let our empath ways or people pleasing ways or, you know, that kind of thing get in the way of our coaching?
Yeah. So there's a combination of elements for that, right? So we've got the personal growth side of things, which is I want everybody to like me. I feel like I'm not good enough. I want them to connect to me the way I'm connecting to. I want them to be my friend. You cannot be friends with your clients. It's just it's a power imbalance, right? It's not appropriate. And the idea that they have to all like you, they don't have to like you. They have to trust you. There's a difference, right? And so the trust factor is built in based on how solidly you hold them in that container. And so that means that you have to be willing to hold a space. You have to be willing to set boundaries in that space and enforce those boundaries in case there are boundary crossers, which there often are sometimes, you know, depending on how well you set them. and things like that. And so there's interpersonal things, or interpersonal things, I should say, and things around how we feel about ourselves, how we manage our own emotions, how we find our value, because oftentimes we'll overgive because we don't feel valuable enough. We don't feel good enough. And so we overgive, or we fire hose and things like that. And so those things become issues in your business as you move forward. And the other side of it is the energetic side of it, which is, how do you make sure that somebody else is not impacting your energy? So if you've got an angry client and you had a rageaholic parent, how do you not get triggered in the middle of that conversation, right? Because that can be very triggering if you haven't done your work in that regard. If you haven't found a way to keep your energy separate from your clients so that you're not mixing your energy with them, and so therefore their energy isn't becoming your energy and triggering you at a deeper level, right? So it's a combination of both things. You really do have to step from personal growth into the energetics so that you can create transformation that allows you to actually see the world differently, so that you're not trying to go against your lesser demons, right? You know, the things that you know you are likely to do. You won't be likely to do them if you see yourself differently.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the other things you mentioned here was boundaries. So give us an example of what boundaries mean, because I think a lot of people think, oh yeah, I'm going to stand by my boundaries. And they think it means just saying to someone, hey, you can't do that to me anymore. And that's not a boundary, right? So, I mean, if you do this, here's how I will respond, right? That's my understanding of boundaries, but maybe you have a different perspective. So tell me, what do you mean by boundaries? What's some examples we should be setting? Things like that.
Yeah, a boundary is simply a line in the sand saying, you don't cross here. There will be consequences. Okay. Whether those consequences are, you don't get to be in my presence anymore, or whether it's, this thing will happen, So in my programs, for instance, I have some very clear boundaries with my clients. The rule number one is I am the only one to coach. Inside the program, nobody else is coaching but me, because all my people are helpers and they all want to help, and they help by not paying attention to their own stuff and paying attention to other people's stuff. And so it keeps them focused on their own stuff because they're not allowed to coach anybody else. And that one is the one that is most likely to get walked over when somebody's new into my programs, because this is their habit, right? And so I just have to remind them, there's nice ways to say that's not okay. You go, okay, just a reminder that the only person who coaches is me. And they go, oh, well, right, sorry, right? It's not a problem. They didn't mean to cross the boundary. They just forgot it was there. So sometimes it's an easy thing to say that. Other times it's about boundaries in terms of the client and their neediness. And that's an energy thing, right? So sometimes you'll get a client who collapses into damsel in distress mode, right? And they're like, I can't. They're in full victim state, right? That is not a coaching state. That is a therapy state. Because if somebody's committed to being in their victim, no amount of coaching is going to pull them out of it, right? You can look at them and say, okay, you've collapsed into victim. Is this who you want to be right now? And if they go, yes, well then, okay, I'm going to let you go do that, right? I can't do anything with you if you're not willing to stand up, right? So you've got to be really clear about what you can and what you can't do. And coaches need to be very careful not to be trying to do therapy, because that will get you in trouble with the law, right? You have to be certified as a therapist to do therapy. So I am even with people who are certified therapists, if you are doing coaching, you really should not be mixing it with therapy, because that is a gray area, and it makes for really not yummy things legally, right? So you want to be very careful around that. And so the boundary piece is very much about, where are you setting the edges of yourself, of the container that you're holding, of the intention that you're creating? What is the container itself? And when you have defined that, you have created a space that people can see the edges of, and now they feel much safer. If you walk in with absolutely no boundaries and you're willy-nilly and there's no rules and there's nothing going on, then people do not feel as safe. And without safety, there is no growth. So that's an important factor.
Right. Yeah. Boundaries can give people structure, or here's what I know I can and can't do, or, that kind of thing. So what about the energy behind what we're doing? So I think I saw on your website, you had a video that generated some curiosity within me, because the first part of it was, have you read any of these books? And it was books like Atomic Habits and other books like that. And so tell me a little bit more about, like, what I see a lot is people doing things. I do my habits, I do my strategies, I do my tactics, but then the energy behind it is misaligned, or it's like, I'm doing this out of like major scarcity or something like that. And so then the results of the action, or the energy, how they're doing it doesn't land well because people can sense it, or, something like that. So tell me a little bit about your theories on why is it important about the energy we put into what we're actually doing, and maybe tell us about the book thing and why you have that and all that.
Yeah. Okay. So two things. So when people first get into the spiritual world, they come in and they look to orient to it. And so that starts what can become a spiritual addiction. So people come in and they're like absorbing as much as they can. They're binging multiple podcasts. They're reading tons of books. They've got like a pile of books next to their bed. They got a pile of books next to their chair in their living room, all of which are partially read, and all of which they're like, I'm going to get back to that and read more. And while I'm consuming all this other stuff on YouTube, right? So, this is the initial orientation phase. And there's the challenge with this phase is that people come in looking for the magic pill. That's what they're looking for in this orientation phase. Is I want the magic pill that's going to make me feel better and make me be perfectly spiritual and have connection to my guides and be magic, right? They all want the magic pill, and they think that a book or a course or a video will give it to them. That does not happen. I just want to let you know now that that is not true. And what happens is that people who will not let go of that belief get stuck in the spiritual addiction. And so when they do that, they start doing compensating things like buying crystals and incense and all of the yoga mats and the things, and they buy the props to feel like they are being spiritual, because they don't know how to be spiritual, because they're still thinking the answer is outside of themselves. And so they're buying things to compensate for that, right? And so when you actually get that there is no magic pill and that you are the magic pill, that doing your inner work is the magic pill, then that addiction phase tends to wane. It doesn't go away because you still feel like you're inadequate. You don't know exactly what you need. You're looking at all your stuff and it's like, right? And so that happens. But the need to consume everything and anything reduces dramatically. And then instead what happens is you start to seek out a focused path to get you where you want to go, right? And that's when you stop doing rando stuff and you want the answer. You want the path. I'm willing to work it. I'm willing to be in my stuff, but I need to know it's going to work because I'm still in a control freak phase, right? Because all of us come in this control freak thing. So when that happens, then you start to really do your inner work. Now, as a practitioner, there are two phases where people do their practitioner work. You can do it from stage 3, which is that seeking for, the magic pill. You can do it in that stage where and most of us do a phase in that stage, which is proving to ourselves that we can do the magic and not just that other people can do it by doing it for others. So we'll learn how to do readings. We'll do some teaching of things that we learned. We'll do a little coaching, things like that. But then we hit a hard stage where we're like, I need to do my work. And for a lot of people, they step back out of teaching at that point. Some may not, depends on how far in you are and how big your business got before you hit that stage. And then you do a lot of inner work, and then you can come back into it at stage 5. And stage 5 is you're further along, you're teaching from more wisdom space. Your ego isn't as involved, because in stage 3, you kind of have to be right. You're terrified to be wrong, because if you're wrong, then maybe they'll know that you're not good enough and you don't know what you're talking about, right? All of that. Whereas when you hit stage 5, you're kind of like, there is so much to learn. There's no way everybody could know it all. And so if I don't know, I'm just going to say, great question. I don't know. Let me look it up. Right. And I'm not going to worry about it. So there's 2 different stages there. So that's the answer to the books question.
Yeah. No, that was a great answer. And yeah,
you had asked about alignment, right? And so you want me to give you that? Okay.
I love it.
I know I'm monologuing, but I'll give you the answer to the alignment piece. So the alignment piece is very much about what we are. See, this is one of the biggest problems with things like affirmations, right? Is that people like, oh, we have to say affirmations, which sets off your BS meter in a big way, right? Because you're saying something that you absolutely know is not true. And so you're now in an inner battle with your own belief structures. And so that's problematic. And that happens too when you start putting yourself out as a business owner, when you've never actually gotten a client and you've never actually taught a class and you've never actually done any of these things. There's this imposter syndrome that pops up. And you have to be able to lean into the knowledge that you are capable rather than the I have done this before piece. And so it's very much about being able to line up with that. And so oftentimes, especially if you're getting started and you're in lack, I see a lot of people doing money abundance programs who have no money, right? And you talk to them in the background and they're like, oh yeah, I don't have any. I'm like, why are you teaching what you don't know? Right. And they're like, well, I'm hoping that I'll get into it and it'll work, because somebody else told me. It's like, but you're not living it yet. Right. And that's when things get out of alignment, right? You have to be in alignment with what it is that you're trying to teach. You have to already have learned what you're trying to teach. Your ideal target market is 5 years ago, right? If you 5 years ago needed X, Y, and Z, then that's what you should be teaching if you have learned X, Y, and Z in the intervening 5 years, right? And so there's that piece as well. But then there's also issues around receiving. And this is the biggest one I see, is I can't make any money because I can't receive. And if I can't receive, then no money will come in, right? And we have these issues, especially if you were given in your childhood, you didn't get things and everybody else's needs were higher priority than yours. Then you learn that receiving is bad, especially if you were ever called selfish. My generation got called selfish a lot, right? And so all of these things create blocks to receiving. If you have fear of your own power because you have not emptied your well of rage, and when you go off in a way that makes you feel bad all the time, it makes you feel really, really guilty because you got angry and you blew up, then you will limit your ability to access your own power because you don't trust yourself with that power. And inherently you're a good person. Even if you're angry one, you're a good person and you don't want to hurt people. So you will not give yourself access to more power because you know that the rage can take over and therefore make you more powerful and lay waste to the world, sort of thing. Right. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of these types of blocks that show up.
Interesting. Yes. And when you were going through those stages, I know they're more energetic stages, but I feel like that's the stages also of entrepreneurship almost. Like I, see a lot of the time, I like the stage 5 where you're like not triggered by things or your ego's out of it. I think in the early days of my business, I would get so like, oh, I got a rejection. I'd be out for like 2 days to recover. Yeah. Like, or, oh, like, I feel like I just could see myself in each stage of the game. Yeah. And then
I used to be like, heartbroken every time somebody unsubscribed,
Right. And nowadays it's like, no, this is my separate entity, my business. And then there's me separate from my business. And it doesn't need to mean more than it does. Right. Yeah. So, nowadays, like I'm so even keel and there's pros and cons to that because I used to be like a roller coaster, like, oh, I got it, like something amazing. And then, like highs and lows. And so you get really excited about things. Now it's like, I'm more like smooth, but it's, anyway, so I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but the point there is that it resonated so deeply because I think entrepreneurs go through each spiritual stage like you mentioned. Yeah. And then the last thing you said is the alignment. So of course you might block yourself or self-sabotage if you don't really believe in what you're doing, or there's you're worried of if I get to a successful point, that fear of success, will I be able to handle it? Or some of those examples you gave are really good. So if someone notices that they're blocking themselves, what's something what's a step they could take, or what do they do at that point when they realize, like, maybe they're listening and they're like, ooh, that one's me. What should they be thinking about?
Yeah, so it depends on the block, because each block has its own foundation and its own process to get through it. But, I'll give you an example. So I'll talk to you about a block that I've recently worked through, and I'll give you sort of the way it works. So about a year ago, I started getting hints from Spirit that I was going to have to get better known, that I was actually going to have to get famous. And I was like, I'm not so excited about famous, right? like, why? Why can't I just have my little side of the world and, it'll be fine? And they're like, no, you need to have a bigger impact. You need to get more known. You need to get famous. And I was like, And then, so I started working on the mindset, right? Because my highest value is freedom. And somehow in my mind, famous and freedom were opposite to each other. That being famous meant that I had to walk around with security guards, that I couldn't go anywhere unmolested, that I couldn't do things that I wanted to do in certain places, that I couldn't just live my life and not have people bothering me all the time. And then Spirit, I said, okay, I need to address this. I need to adjust it. I did not see any upside to being famous at all. In my mind, there was no upside. And so that was the first thing, was I looked at what's the opposite, right? So the opposite was, well, being famous means more money. And go figure, more money means more freedom. How did that go? Didn't recognize that. And so I'm like, okay, so that's a balance to the freedom piece. And it means I can afford the security guards, is how my brain put it, right? Because you're stuck in this, right? And so then, I had a reading from somebody and they said, oh yeah, you're going to be a household name by the end of the year. And I'm like, right? Now I got to really work on it, right? But Spirit actually started doing things for me to help me, because I said I wanted the help. And so the first thing that happened was Neil Donald Walsh's people reached out to have him come onto my podcast to promote his book called God Talk, right? And I got to talk to him about what his life was like, because he's one of the most famous people in the spiritual world. He's one of the more famous people. He's written 14 books, right? So, and I said, what's your life like? He's like, well, I don't go out to dinner anymore. And I'm like, why? He said, well, because inevitably somebody comes up and gives me shit for drinking wine, right? I'm like, okay. And he's like, yeah, it's just, they give me a hard time and I just don't like it and whatever. And then the next thing that happened was I was in a video about moving to Panama, because I live in Panama, and I went through this tour group company that I liked a lot. So I was in one of their videos, and somebody recognized me in the town that I live in and said, oh my God, you're in the video, blah, blah, blah. And I realized it was from that. And I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, do you guys want to have dinner with us? We can sit and talk about it. And then I was like, oh yeah, I don't mind that. I don't mind when people come up and talk to me. I like people, right? And it doesn't work for him because it's not who he is. He's more of an introvert. But I was like, I like people, so I'm an extrovert. So yeah, that's okay. I'm like, all right, so that's not a problem. And then John Rhys Davies, who is Gimli from Lord of the Rings and the professor from Sliders. I mean, famous actor, right? He and his daughter came into town to take photos to help with a fundraiser for somebody that he knew in town. I live in a town of 25,000 people in the middle of nowhere. So, Spirit worked hard on this one. Just want to say. And so he shows up. Nobody else is in line when we're there. I get to spend 20 minutes talking with him and his daughter about what their life is like. I'm like, do you walk around with security guards? I'm like, no, only in the countries where it's dangerous, but otherwise, we can walk down the street and nobody will notice him one day. And other days he'll get, a bunch of people around. But it's a crapshoot as to which one it's going to be. And it's okay. They're like, yeah, it's not a big deal. And I was like, oh, okay, I've heard it from two. I believe it now. Right. So this is what happens, is that you put it out to spirit that you want it to change. You're open to the idea that it can change. You're actively working on what is in the way. Why am I afraid of this? What is it I don't like about it? What is it that I'm assuming is true that possibly isn't? What are the upsides of what it is instead, right? How is it that I'm perceiving that things need to be, and is that really true? Going through, I love Byron Katie's The Work. Those 4 questions, if you Google those are the bomb, man. Those things work like no tomorrow. So that's a really good format.
Amazing. Okay. We'll have to remember to put those 4 questions in the show notes. And so totally what I'm hearing from you is that you open yourself up to exploration rather than only honing in and laser focusing on all the things that could be wrong with being famous. You opened up the door to, well, but this, and you don't have to have bodyguards, and you don't, almost like disproving some of the things that you believed about it, or exploring, well, would I really hate that much? Would I not be able to handle talking to people? No, I like talking to people. So very interesting. So where could people connect with you? I know that one of the things we touched on today was boundaries, and I believe you have a free gift about that. So if you want to share that, that's all good.
Yeah. So I have a course called Boundaries for Empaths. It's a free e-course. So I believe you're going to link it in the show notes. But it's also available on my website at kellesparta.com, spelled like you see it on the screen, Kelle. And if you click on the blog on the right-hand side, you'll see a link to get to that. And so the Boundaries for Empaths class is all about how do you change the way you hold your energy field so that you get to control who gets to come in and out of it. And if you've ever tried to put up shields or wards, if you've ever tried to put up shields on yourself and they didn't work, it's because you haven't managed your energy field. So your shields will not work until you manage your energy field. And that's super important. And you'll learn about that in the course, as it has instructions on how to do it, and then a 40-minute call about all the different ways that being an empath is impacting you and all the things about that. And you'll be shocked at all the different things that are impacted by that. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Well, we will share that. And thank you so much for being here, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much for listening to this podcast. And if it's really helpful for you, I'd really appreciate if you share it and or leave a written podcast review. This tells the podcast sites that our show is useful, and it will be promoted to more people that way. Thanks again.